So most of y'all who follow my channel know that pretty much all of last month I was doing a fundraiser for getting a new table saw. And if you saw my video a couple weeks ago on the 4 acts of a SawStop unboxing, you kind of know what saw I ended up getting. But that isn't quite the whole story. I talked in the earlier video on the different types of saw, from the job site to the contractor to the cabinet to that kind of intermediary hybrid. And through this entire process, when I was raising funds for it, I was kind of working up 3 different levels that I was considering of table saws. And the reason why I ended up here, I think, deserves some analysis, because I might not have made the right decision for my situation. And the reason why I ended up here might not be the reason you're thinking. Understand, when we all started this, the entire reason for me getting a new saw was that the job site saw just did not have the consistency I needed for batch production. And that decision involved a lot more than just the tool, the saw I was going to get. It involved accessories and the things that go with it, as with any tool acquisitioning. You need to be able to use it for a lot of different things. I also promised y'all that I would give you somewhat of an initial impression and review after I had done a couple batch production work. And I've done that now. I did some top manufacturing, the blanks and stuff like that, in 8/4 hard maple. And then I made a little over 100 French squares that just went into my online store. And that was a staple years ago. But the last time I did a production run with them, I just got so frustrated with that job contractor saw in that I could not make a dozen consistent cuts. So there was a lot of quality errors and stuff like that. And I'll talk about this latest production run and in comparison towards the end. So that's what I want to do with this video. I want to kind of give you my reasoning for this purchase, why I chose this one over others, the review of some accessories I bought, and kind of a wrap up of the entire acquisition, build, and actually using the machine for the desired purpose I had with it. So let's get going. But before we get too far into the discussion, I want to offer a huge shout out to these people. They made either major purchases, some of my charcoal illustrations. That was a huge portion of my fundraising. In addition to, I auctioned off Crystal Schwartz's tool chest. Some people made me some very generous, just straight up donations. I also got lots and lots of people that, you know, sent me $5, $10. Here's something for your table saw fund. I had a minor rash of people buying those mallets. I don't know if that was in conjunction with the table saw or that they just came back out. Could have been both combined together, but I'm about sold out of my mallets. I probably only have about 20 left if you want one. Anyways, a lot of people helped out, but these people just did the biggest portion of getting me to this goal. And I do believe I gave a lot of them good value for their money. Costello, Williams, Noble, Richards, Kavanaugh, Allison Strope, and Corbett. Thank you very much. So, to give you a review, about 2 months ago, I did a video on what table saw do you need. And that was the point where I decided I needed to upgrade. I'd been using a job site, a DeWalt table saw, for almost 8, 9 years at that point. And if I did not want to start doing some batch production runs to make product that I can sell to my audience of YouTube, honestly, that was all I needed, even to this day. It accomplished all of my tasks. I never really needed more horsepower. I always wanted more horsepower. You know, a bigger table would have been nice. But the key thing is, when I was doing batch production runs, it wasn't consistent. The table flex, the fence movement, all that kind of stuff meant that I was constantly having to check for accuracy and resetting it up. And I say, if it weren't for that one, I wouldn't need to do it. Well, most of the time you set up the table saw for your dimensions, you make one, maybe two cuts, and then you are changing it. I wanted to be able to set it up, turn the saw on, and make 200 to 300 cuts without changing anything, and have the first cut match up to the last cut. That was my goal in this purchase. And that kind of drove all my decisions. Now, the first sales I made, some of the artwork to Costello and Williams, that put me to the budget of my first goal. And I had 3 goals, and it was about $1,000, $1,500 difference between each goal. And I'm going to name names. I was going to buy that rigid contractor saw. It has a motor out back. It was a true contractor saw. And all the research I've done over the years, the people that had that, they really did like it. They appreciated it for what it was. Its value for its money. And it offered the fence, you know, it was good enough for what I thought I needed to do. And here's the thinking. That probably would have been the smartest decision I could have made, is to stick with that rigid at my production level, economic situation, all that kind of stuff. Because that would not have been my final table saw. I know I would have upgraded it 3 or 4 years later on. But you can buy those brand new for, I want to say, $7.50, and they are selling on Craigslist all day long. They're very, very popular for $350, $400. So imagine that. You could spend a good amount of money, get a reliable, consistent table saw, and any extra money you got, you could buy stuff like better blades, better jigs, the accessories that would go along with it that would allow me to produce a greater variety of stuff. And all those purchases would be lifetime purchases, because they could go along with me to my next table saw. So 3 or 4 years down, I could have all the accessories that make a table saw great, and then upgrade to a better platform for those accessories, and sell that rigid and only lose about $300. I mean, going along that same route, I did sell that job site saw, and I want to say I only paid like $300 for it all that time ago, and I sold it for $250. I also gave them some blades, some jigs and stuff like that were kind of built for it, but that's a great value for the amount of use I got, and that rigid fit in that mold. I would have gotten more out of that saw for the least capital investment and gotten farther down my career path of batch production work at that level. But, you know, kind of pride and stuff like that got to me, and me being on YouTube, there is something to this aspect that your audience judges you by the quality of tools you have. If you're using something like a Ryobi drill saw to do all your sanding and stuff like that, the audience judges you. It's just the way it is. And also, I really was unbelievably frustrated with a lack of consistency. So I was praying I could get to my number 2 level. And at that number 2 level, I was pretty much done. I was going to be happy. I was finding a saw that I felt I could live with for the rest of my woodworking career, making the kind of stuff I anticipate I will be making in the future. You never really know, but I anticipated it. And frankly, that was a Powermatic 64B. It is a true hybrid saw. It is a contractor saw in the form of its frame and the engine, the motor size, 1.75. But if you looked at it, you felt it, you saw the table size, the rigidity of it, and most importantly, that fence that it has on it. It was, you know, cabinet saw quality from the feet, or from the bottom of the cabinet up. The feet, they were contractor saw. And I looked at the price range of a lot of the competition, and I know people were out there saying, hey, for the money you spent on that thing, you could have bought a true 3 horsepower cabinet saw from one of the mail-order Taiwanese companies. But it's one of those situations that I've been researching this a long time. You follow the forums, you ask people what they're doing, you see what's in other cabinet shops. And a recurring comment that I kept seeing over and over and over was that the machines in that caliber, perhaps because in order to save money, they were actually cost savings on things like metallurgy of the gears and such like that, because they were developing slop over their lifetime. And we have some cabinet shopping here in Austin that has the exact model that kind of competes in the price range with that 64B. And you know, you go and play with it and it's like a quarter turn and stuff like that, and the people are saying that the settings aren't staying. It's not as tight as it was when it's brand new. And that's the kind of thing you have to watch out for when you're looking at reviews, because most reviews are over brand new machines and everything's going to work great out of the shop, out of the get-go. It's how things wear over time, and that threw doubts into me into whether that would be a machine I would be keeping my entire life. Granted, there are probably 3 or 4 times as many of those machines out there as they are that 64B. And the people that are buying the 64B are probably more like me in garage workshops and stuff like that, so they aren't putting it through the paces that a professional cabinet shop was doing. It's kind of, you get all the information you can and you make your best choice. I was not concerned with the horsepower. That job site saw had just enough horsepower I want. My concern was repeatable accuracy, and my belief in the way the Powermatic marketing tax work. They go those little extra steps for that kind of stuff, and you pay an extreme premium for it, but I was willing to pay for that. And after that point, I was just going to be earning money for the accessories and stuff like that. I was all set, and at the time I was about to make my purchase, I said, okay, I have my money for that 64B, I have money for these accessories, so I can immediately get to work on doing that 64B with a variety of different stuff. That's going to be my decision. I'm going to wait 1 week, and I'm going to watch Craigslist to see whatever pops up and do some research all over Texas, and nothing really popped up that panned out. I had a bunch of inquiries and stuff like that, but nothing really panned out. And the last few days, I sat there and I just, kind of cheesy of me, but I decided to try to pull the YouTube card, and I made a phone call to SawStop to see if there was any kind of deals or discounts a YouTuber could get, because the price difference between that rigid and the 64B and the 64B and the very basic, they call it the PCS, this is a hybrid saw. Unlike, it's more on the cabinet saw side of the hybrid saw, but it meets all the hybrid saw characteristics. You know, it's about the same price jump. It was something that was well on my budget. So I called them and asked them, and I talked to them, told them what I was doing, and they looked at my YouTube channel, and they basically offered me a small discount and free shipping. Now, most manufacturers have sales throughout the year, you know, a certain percentage off. And if you were to get that sale and pick it up at a retailer, you pretty much got the same deal as I did. And for that deal, all they asked me to do was not cover up the logo for, you know, a year or two and actually make something on YouTube with it, you know, products and stuff like that over that time period, which is okay for me. And my YouTube creds just got me that discount now instead of having to wait for sale season. And so that's what I did. Instead of going for the 64B, I took out a small square capital loan to cover the difference. I went ahead and got this one, and it's not for the reason you think. Yes, it does have that safety feature, and if you're in my economic class, even if you have health insurance, your deductible is probably so high your insurance isn't going to cover anything right here. So yes, this is insurance, but my reasoning for getting this saw was less about that and more about future possibilities. As I said, this is a hybrid saw. It's 1 3/4 horsepower, which puts it right in that saw range. The table dimensions are a little bit smaller than a true cabinet saw. It's a lot lighter than a true cabinet saw. The metal, a little bit thinner, a little bit less iron, that kind of stuff. The trunnions are a little smaller, but they are really robust because they are taking that explosive hit when that thing goes off. But it is a hybrid saw, and that is perfectly fine with me. The very first thing I cut on this was 1/4 hard maple, and it didn't bog whatsoever, even at 115 volts. So I'm happy with that one. The French squares I was doing a 10/4 cherry, no problem whatsoever. People that were saying to get the bigger motor or bigger machine. You don't need to. For my needs, for what I did, the power was just great. I liked the added size of this. I think it's about the same size as that 64B, but from what I compared to, it fit the bill perfectly. But SawStop as a company has done something kind of unique here that I haven't seen any other manufacturer do. I don't know what my future is going to be. This machine can be modified for wherever direction I want to go. If for some reason I do decide I want 3 horsepower, well, they have a kit that you can install that 3 horsepower motor. And you only pay about $100 penalty for starting out at the smaller end and upgrading later on. If I decide I'm going to be a cabinet shop and I really do need a longer table or bigger table, those are all bolt-ons. If I want a slider, I can add that on. Pretty much all table saws will allow you to put a router table on the end, but they do have a special thing on it. But there was an upgrade path that no matter where my career took me in this craft, I could see using this, the cheapest, most basic model they had, and going from there. So I looked at it like I was paying quite a bit of a premium for a more flexible future. But I need to take that all the way back. I am now in this $2,500 to $3,000 range, and that rigid was less than $1,000. It could do all the stuff I want it to do now, but it didn't have that growth potential. I'm basically paying $2,000 more for this than that. So you have to tell yourself, is that justifiable in your situation? Honestly, I can't really answer that one because there's a huge argument that I should have gone cheaper. But this right here will be a lifetime investment for me in my reasoning. That isn't. So this is the SawStop PCS. They call it their professional cabinet saw, but really it is in the category. It meets all the classification of a hybrid saw. It is their 1.75 horsepower motor in 30-inch size. The smallest, cheapest model they have in this category. You go one category down and you're looking at a true contractor saw where they have the same horsepower motor hanging off the back so it can be removed so that the saw can be easily relocated. So this is one step up from their contractor saw. Above this they have their, I forget what the acronym is called, but it's a much heavier machine, much more robust machine. Its proportions, motor size, all that kind of stuff fits more with what we would consider a classic cabinet saw. Now, when you get the smaller model, you do get what they call their, what's their base fence system. I'll tell you, I'm perfectly happy with that one. Maybe it's just from where I'm coming from, but that thing feels solid to me. After initial production run where I was depending upon that fence for quite a few cuts, it works great. No complaints whatsoever. Also, I have no complaints with the horsepower of this thing. Everyone was telling me that I talked to, just go ahead and spend the money to get the 3 horsepower. I can tell you this, I do not need it for what I do. I can't imagine what I would be doing that would require that one. So why not save that money and invest it in some accessories? Well, let me tell you about the very few accessories I got. From SawStop, I did go ahead and get their base mobile cabinet system. It works great. I can't see their hydraulic system looks pretty cool, but it's not integrated. It's more one that this saw sits on. This one seems to be built specifically for this saw. I'm completely happy with it. You saw me rolling around here. I have a very small shop. This thing's been moved quite a bit. The other accessory I got was I did go ahead and get the dado accessories so I can run a dado, because this first production runs I'm using a 1/4 inch dado. So there's the first upgrade, and that's about all I got. Oh, and lastly, when I said that the SawStop could be upgraded, this runs on 110, a typical garage wall socket, but you can rewire it for 220. And the advantages, theoretical advantages for doing that one, is the motor will run a lot cooler, especially in heavier usage, and it will speed up quicker. Which technically you won't get more horsepower by upgrading to 220, but it's one of those situations where in real life it will work like you have more horsepower, because if it starts to bog, it will recover quicker, and it won't heat up as much when you're putting a heavy load on it when you start doing thicker stuff. So my thinking is I'm going to use this at the factory settings for quite a few production runs, and then at some later date I'm going to go ahead and upgrade it to the 220 so that I can report back to y'all the difference. But right now, this was a $70 upgrade, and the wiring diagram, it looks, from what I say, it's like a 20-minute job. So for 70 bucks, you could upgrade the base model to perform even better if you wanted to. I also got 2 saw blades. I got the ubiquitous Forest Woodworker 2. Mainly I bought the name on that one. I don't have much experience with them. It's a full kerf blade. Just everyone ranted and raved on it, and the fact that you can send it to get resharpened. For me, that's probably a lifetime general use blade. And I'm telling you, from what I've used it so far, it's doing great. The biggest difference is more the feel of the cut, because I've always used a thin kerf blade, and this is a full kerf. So as I push the wood through, it feels not only much more aggressive, but I can feel a little bit of vibration in the wood that I wasn't expecting, but the end results are a lot cleaner, so results speak. The other blade I got was from Infinity, and it is a single blade 1/4 inch dado, one tooth. You don't have a bunch of different stacks on that one. And I got this because the French squares I use have a 1/4 inch blade, and I'm also going to start reproducing those grooving planes and a couple other things that I used to do that all kind of center around this 1/4 inch cut. And it's a flat bottom cut, so it's great for a lot of joinery aspects. Man, was I impressed with this after that French square production run. I basically cut the slot for all of my blades, and beforehand I had the thin kerf, and it had the bat ears on it when you cut it. So I was actually making 3 or 4 cuts every time I used it to get as close to a flat bottom as I can. And because it was thin, you know, you would set your fence up, you would cut once, you would rotate it around, you would cut that, you would do the whole batch like that, then you would move your fence and clear out the middle by reversing it that way. And invariably, over the course of a dozen or so cuts, you would have to go back and recheck the gap and then move the fence or something like that. With this blade, I knew even if I was off on the alignment from the dead center, it would cut this consistency because there was no variable there. Even if the fence moved, there was no variable there. So at the end, I measured it, the first cut and the last cut, and they were identical, and that was mind-boggling to me. I know that's what table saws should do, but I've never had one that would do that. Plus the fact that I could then use the drum sander that I got as my major purchase last year. I seem to be doing one major purchase every year. And I could dimension those blades down perfectly, so much so that when I was gluing them up, I discovered I didn't have to clamp them. I could lay some glue on top, I could slide it in, and I got no advantage from squeezing the 2 fenders on the front, the wings on the French square. I could just set it down and it was perfect. Blew my mind. Really impressed with this blade, with the exception that I believe one of the teeth is slightly off cockwise, because one side of that you could see the serrations, and I'll put a picture up here of what I'm talking about, where one side you saw these curves as the blade went by, the other side was dead perfect. That won't make a difference in a lot of the stuff I do, but if I ever have a show joint, it will show. I have put a call into Infinity about a week ago. I just haven't heard back on them. I don't know if that is normal, but the end result was I was really happy with the product that was coming off of it. The other thing I got was something that, because people have said comment-wise that, you know, the miter gauges that come on these saws aren't the greatest out there. They're adequate, will serve your needs, but they're kind of finicky. I have been following this guy. He makes these out of his garage. It's miter set, and it allows you to set up miter gauges based off pins for high accuracy and repeatability. It's called miter set, and he has two versions. One just sets up your degrees. The other one sets up things for like 20 sections in a 360 and stuff like that. And that's for turners who do a lot of segmentation. And for the price, getting the kit of both of them, it wasn't that much more money, so I went and got both of them. But it's miter set, and it really has made the miter gauge on this one pretty accurate. The downside is the idea is you have two pins and a slot, and you take the two pins, you decide which degree you want, you put your miter gauge in there and you just push up and lock it in. But the locking mechanism is a twist one, and what I found is if I wasn't really careful, as I was locking it down, it would rotate about a half a degree. So I'd lock it down, I'd recheck it, and I would see a little air gap on one of the pins, and I had to redo it. So just be careful when you're doing that. I think most all miter gauges have that little twist thing on them. And the last accessory I bought was from Grizzly, and it was their President's Special. It's a little kit of gauges that he put together, feeler gauges, and I bought this one because I figured I might have to tune up the saw, which I did have to do some minor tuning on it. But one bonus was it came with this magnet. It's not an overly powerful magnet, but it locks things down. And I've used this so much as a stop for cross cuts on the table saw. You know, you set the gap over there and it gives you a repeatable bump over there. Really cool device, and this being the President's kind of kit, the price is just great on it. It gives you a feeler gauge and some kit stuff like that. I do plan on doing a super tuning your table saw episode in a later date. Well, leave comments if that's something of interest to y'all. And so the final section in this little discussion is my impression of the saw so far through that production, the setup and stuff like that. My initial impression in unboxing it, putting it together, that kind of stuff was pretty good. I wasn't expecting a pure diamond. There is a price point, even though this is a pretty expensive machine, it does have a lot of electronics that the other manufacturers aren't doing. So, you know, it is a competitively priced when you consider what you're getting. And in this hybrid category, you can't expect everything. There were some minor things that I thought, well, if I was doing it, I probably wouldn't have skipped the money on. Me personally, yes, you know, you got to understand this is a budget miter, but the material they use on these handles and on this handle right here, it's that kind of rubber that over time I've always experienced will kind of dissolve or deform. You know, it gets that kind of moldy stuff from your skin oils over time. You're having to constantly clean it. It's not the most confidence inspiring for long-term durability kind of rubber. I don't understand why they couldn't have just done, you know, a nice chrome piece or a brass piece or something like that. It's those little things that where you are touching the machine all the time that gives your audience that sense of quality and stuff like that. And you know somebody's hand's going to be on this all the time. They're going to be here all the time, and you really want it to be the cheap rubber. And kind of on the same lines, the little locking wheels they have on it, they are plastic. I can't imagine they saved a lot of money going plastic versus steel. I mean, even the 64B has metal, and it's just that kind of little cool zing you get when you touch it that just gives you a sense of quality out there. Other than that, unboxing the machine, there was a small neck right here, and I believe that probably came from the factory when they were packing it up. It was no big deal to me. I'm just pointing out because it was there. Maybe the cabinet top got dropped and the little corner got dinged up. To fix it, it literally took 2 swipes with a mill file, and then I just took some sandpaper to kind of even it out. No big deal. Not something I would call them even to tell them about, because it's a non-issue in my mind at this point in time. What is the issue is this center metal section on my area. Now, guys, ignore the rust that you've seen right here. When I first got it, I set it up. It's 110 in my shop at this time of year. I sweat a lot. I literally set it up and it was pristine looking. You know, I cleaned it with a rag. I even cleaned it with Simply Green to make sure I got all my oils off. I put Johnson's wax on it. It looked pristine when I went to bed, and I came back the next morning and buffed off that wax, and these were right here. So it's just going to be something I'm going to have to deal with at this part of the country. But also, you see me, I'm kind of leaning on it, using it as a platform. I'm sure oils in my skin are causing it to tarnish and that kind of stuff. It is smooth, but it does have a little bit of that rust look to it. This is the first iron thing I have that has done that. When, you know, my bandsaws, all the other lathes and stuff like that. But it is what it is. My biggest issue right now, and this might be purely academic, but this center section right here is not 100% flat. And how I find out about that was when I was putting this piece on. The idea is that you put a straight edge all the way across this right here, and then as you install the metal wings, you kind of lift it up to lock it down. And I could get the straight edge to line up with this section right here, but then when I moved it over, I noticed that the straight edge was lifting as I came over. So this section right here, right behind the blade, has a little bit of a dip to it. And you notice that I've got the wings set up so that they run smooth over here, but right there they will kind of catch on both sides. Well, on both sides, right in the middle, but they are smooth. They run right off the top. So it is ever so slightly dipped this way and slightly in back. The front is dead perfect. It is dead perfect right here. It just kind of dips towards the middle. And I called SawStop on that one, and I talked to their engineer, and they said that's kind of within tolerance. And, you know, you think about it, that makes sense to me. Because even if I was doing a piece of plywood, the plywood's registerings over here, you know, a few thousandths of dip right there, a 64th dip in the back, that's not really going to affect what's happening at the cutting edge very much. If I'm doing joinery, that's irrelevant for all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to draw big fluff about that one, because, you know, the initial reaction was, oh, a bit disappointment. But, you know, I've talked to other people who have table saws, and they have dips at different parts of their tables too. It's just kind of the norm, it seems, and it doesn't affect the end result, and that's the important part. So, end result, I'm happy with my decision. Nothing's perfect, and nothing in life is ever perfect, but for what I do, what my future plans are, and whatever the future holds for my woodworking career, I don't think I'm going to have to upgrade or replace the entire machine. I have an upgrade path for the machine for lots of different directions I could go that isn't easily available with a lot of the other competition, or even that hybrid saw I was looking at from Powermatic. That would meet my needs perfectly now, and if I progressed in my expected career path, but this gives me options, and I kind of really like that idea. And notice, none of this conversation did I talk about the safety aspect. It was all about what I could do in my shop and where I could go and what options my money could buy. And in that situation, this could have been the worst decision, and that original rigid could have been the best. Tell me in the comments below what you actually think.